When my family gathered for Thanksgiving this year, we had three couples of my generation, five couples, and one is yet unmarried, of the next generation, and nine children ranging from 6 months to 8 years in the third generation. That was supplemented by three generations of the family of one set of in-laws, the parents in the first generation, four couples in the second generation, and four children in the third generation. As a result, we had a total of 40 people at Thanksgiving dinner. We expect similar numbers at Christmas. Even with a ban on gifts for adults, which is occasionally violated, the pile of presents under the Christmas tree is pretty awesome. In past years, Sylvia and I, who have no children or grandchildren to contribute to the larger family, have been significant contributors to the gifts under the tree. But we live in an over 55 condominium complex of about 1,200 people. It is, in effect, a small village, a community unto itself, and part of a township of about 25,000 people. Our little village gives to the township in many ways, besides paying more than our fair share of taxes. Supporting the food bank, collecting toys for children, raising money to support the first aid squad, the police, and the fire department, adopting families at Christmas to provide toys for children, clothing and bedding for the whole family, and sometimes kitchen appliances, and so on. Therefore, Sylvia and I have decided to redirect our giving through our community, using the funds we have in the past used for gifts for the children in our family for our community efforts. We are talking to the parents in the second generation to explain our decision and to suggest that they explain it to the children in the third generation. My talk today will give some background for this decision. Communities have existed for thousands of years. They appear to have first developed during the transition from nomadic hunter-gatherer families to agriculturalists who lived in permanent settlements. The settlements grew to include multiple families and to support craft specialists such as tool makers, potters, jewelry makers, shamans, and the like. Agricultural societies grew to support urbanizations. In general, these larger communities were situated along rivers, such as in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and along the Mekong River in Southeast Asia. Each urbanization was supported by a large collection of small agricultural communities. Later, the same pattern extended into Europe and Northwest Asia, which became Russia. The pattern of small communities supporting urbanizations continued for thousands of years. Each small community was typically an aggregation of several families who supported each other. It was the community, not the family, that gathered for celebrations, religious events, defense, and responses to disasters. The cities became the locus for specialists such as craftspeople, merchants, financiers, and administrators. And the cities also developed a new form of society where a central administration provided common services and individual families dealt with the central administration rather than their neighbors. However, the vast majority of people still lived in small communities. Beginning in the 17th century, this social structure began to change. Industrialization brought large numbers of people together to work as individuals under the supervision and direction of small numbers of bosses. Agriculture changed from requiring the majority of the population to the work of a small fraction of the population supported by machinery and by factories providing fertilizer and pesticides. Factories gathered people in large cities where they lived as individually as they worked, that is, in crowds that didn't interact with each other. The development of mass media in the 20th century exacerbated this trend. Communication became largely one way. Entertainment was developed centrally but enjoyed privately. Information was aggregated by large organizations and distributed for private consumption. Organizations replaced communities. Top-down direction and one-way communication replaced the democratic interactions of communities. I want to quote from The Great Dechurching by Jim Davis and Michael Graham. Contemporary America simply isn't set up to promote mutuality, care, or common life. Rather, it is designed to maximize individual accomplishment as defined by professional and financial success. Such a system leaves precious little time or energy for forms of community that don't contribute to one's own professional life or, as one ages, the professional prospects of one's children. Workism reigns in America. In the history of what is now the United States, there has been a conflict between individualism and community. We have celebrated the individuals and their accomplishments, the pioneers who explored new territory and paved the way for homesteaders and traders who settled the new lands, the inventors and entrepreneurs who created new businesses and industries, and the celebrities who gave form to our culture. On the other hand, we have largely ignored the impact of communities on the growth of our nation. I have participated in town meetings in New England towns. I have attended town council meetings in mid-Atlantic towns where the populace can debate with and in front of the administrators of the town. We still have public schools and libraries that were formed by the communities they serve. In our society that now focuses on individual attainment, our remaining communities are facing more and more challenges and are becoming less important in our lives. Most people have lost sight of the importance of communities. Our schools and libraries are in danger. You may recall that in many discussions we have had about conflicts in our society, I have pointed to this tension between individualism and community as a major factor that doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. That is why Sylvia and I have decided to give to our community instead of to the children in our family. It is very important to me to do what I can to support the community spirit. However, there are still some communities that spread across national populations. Unlike historical communities, these are communities of interest that draw their membership across widely distributed populations rather than geographically localized populations. Let's call them distributed communities. One example is sports fans. The followers of a team create evanescent communities at games, including activities such as tailgating and memorabilia expositions. Sports fans are remarkable for their commitment. They wear team clothing, they paint their faces in team colors, and they can quote statistics about team members ad nauseum. While sociologists assert that sports are an important part of a society, I don't get it. Another example is political parties. Well, these are national organizations. They depend on local groups that are more like communities. Presidential candidates have state organizations, which in turn have local committees, which are composed of people who believe in the political process. Even today, with the distressing divisions between our political parties, we cannot deny those who commit their time and effort to the local projects. There are other forms of geographically distributed communities based on common interests. For all the disruption that social media have caused, they have enabled the creation of interest groups based on common concerns, such as groups with rare diseases in common. These groups provide support to people in distress and advice from reasonably trustworthy sources. Labor unions are similarly based on common interests, and in many cases include geographically distributed membership. However, while a union is in many ways a community and intended to be democratic in nature, it does have a hierarchical structure with administrators and leaders. Fraternal organizations, such as the Rotary Clubs, Elks Clubs, and the Masons, have been important substitutes for local communities, but their influence is shrinking. The lapse of communities and the growth of governments has left us without many of the support activities that communities used to provide. We have seen the development of nonprofit organizations that have taken on those activities. While these organizations have helped, they provide a means for relatively few people to participate in distributed communities. If anything, they provide the vast majority with an excuse to remain individualists and avoid being in community. Finally, there are religions. Some religions, such as Catholicism or Baptist denominations, are national or international hierarchies. However, congregational religions, such as the Congregational Denomination of Protestants or Unitarian Universalism, are focused on the individual congregation, which is a community unto itself. The congregation has a democratic structure, often with an ordained leader, but most decisions are made by the membership. In what we call developed countries, in North America and Europe, fewer people participate in religious groups. Congregational denominations are shrinking. In China, the national government is very hostile to religions. I believe that it is important to move the balance between individuals and communities back towards the community. Therefore, I have been thinking about how we can do that. What can we do? As I mentioned before, organizations have largely replaced local communities. Therefore, we need to find ways for those organizations to take on more of the functions that communities provided to our civilization. I am going to concentrate on religions as the organizations that pay the most attention to the beneficial activities formerly provided by communities. First, let us consider what we can do to give support as organizations. We can provide financial support where we as a community can provide funds. For example, we can participate in auctions that raise money for nonprofit organizations. I'll let John speak to that later. Where are we? We can divert part of our weekly collections, which are primarily intended to support our own congregation. We can invite representatives of other organizations to speak to our congregation and ask congregants to contribute to collections for them. As I explained before, nonprofits enable a small number of people to engage in the activities that used to be part of a basic community, but that our individualistic society no longer provides. When we, as a congregation, provide funds to nonprofits, we share in their communal activities. We can provide organization to organization support, such as working with another congregation. We can participate in demonstrations and protests in support of issues we deem important. Although, as a congregation, we aren't supposed to engage in political activity, any number of congregations can gather to express our personal but shared opinions and beliefs. We can also provide more direct communal support through activities such as working in food kitchens, organizing and operating clothing drives, or writing numerous letters or postcards to politicians or voters. Next, let us consider what we can do to provide direct support to individuals. We can, as a community, adopt a family or a person in need. For example, we might choose an immigrant with a challenging status. Our help might include providing needed belongings such as clothing, grooming supplies, local maps, guidebooks, and textbooks, helping them to learn English, providing legal support, particularly with challenging immigration status, providing temporary housing, and helping finding a permanent place to live. Or we can adopt a school. Our help might include providing needed supplies, either by financial contributions or by collecting the needed articles. For example, creating backpacks full of needed items, volunteering as teachers' assistants, volunteering as counselors, in particular in one-on-one relationships with students, hosting as a congregation events for students. I urge everyone in our congregation to think about what they can and are willing to do as part of our community and within other communities of which you are a part. Sylvie and I are doing so in our village. Let it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.